Do you need some help?
Yes, please.
She turned toward my headlights the exact way my wife used to turn toward a sound in another room, and my foot was on the brake before I'd decided anything at all. Rain was coming down in sheets that night, the kind that turns Old Mill Road into a river with a yellow line painted down the middle of it. And there she was, soaked through, one hand braced against the small of her back, the other wrapped around a belly that told me everything I needed to know before she said a word. I want to tell you I stopped because I was raised right, because that's what you do for somebody stranded in a storm. That's part of it. But it isn't the whole truth, and I promised myself when I started telling this that I'd give you the whole truth, even the parts that don't make me look like a good man. My name's Walt Kessler. I'm 54 years old. I run about 60 head of cattle on land outside Sevierville that's been in my family since before the interstate came through. And for 2 years I drove those back roads alone most evenings, not because I had errands, but because the house got too quiet too fast if I sat in it after dark. I lost my wife Mary 2 years before that stormy night. She was 7 months along when her body just stopped cooperating with her, the way bodies sometimes do without asking anybody's permission first. And I lost her and the baby within 11 hours of each other in a hospital room in Knoxville. People kept telling me it would get easier. Some of it did. The part where I could get out of bed, sure. The part where I could hear a woman laugh in a grocery store and not have to leave my cart in the aisle, that part took longer than I let on to anybody. I hadn't so much as had coffee with a woman in 2 years. Wasn't for lack of anybody trying to set me up either. My sister Donna had a list. I just never found anybody who fit right, and I'd stopped expecting to. Before I go any further, tell me in the comments what town or city you're listening from tonight. I always wonder how far a story like this one travels. So there I was, that night, slowing my truck down on a road I had no reason to be on. For a stranger, I had every reason to keep driving past. She flinched when my headlights hit her. Not a small flinch either, the kind that comes from somewhere specific. Somewhere that's taught a person headlights can mean trouble as easy as they can mean help. I eased off the gas, rolled down the window even though the rain came in sideways, and soaked my sleeve in about 4 seconds. "You all right?" I called out, which is a stupid thing to say to a pregnant woman standing alone on a dark road in a downpour, but it's what came out. She didn't answer right away, just stood there, water running off her in the glow of my headlights, deciding something about me the way you decide whether a strange dog is going to bite you. "I'm fine," she said, which was a lie, and we both knew it was a lie, and neither one of us said so. "You're a long way from fine," I said. "Get in the truck before you catch your death out here." I don't know why she got in. She told me later she almost didn't, that she'd had 3 different men slow down that same stretch of road that same night, and none of them she'd trusted. And something about the way I said it, not smooth, not practiced, made her decide I wasn't hunting for anything. She climbed up into the passenger seat, dripping onto the cloth, holding her bag in her lap like it might get taken from her. And for a second, neither of us said a word. Just the wipers going, and her breathing hard like she'd been walking a long way. "Where am I taking you?" I asked. "I don't know yet," she said. "Anywhere that isn't where I came from. That's the whole reason I'm telling you this story. Because I should have driven her to the sheriff's office, or the county shelter over in Pigeon Forge, and let somebody whose actual job it was to look after a stranded pregnant woman take care of her. Instead, I looked at her hands wrapped around that belly, and something in my chest that had been shut for 2 years creaked open about an inch, and I said the thing that changed both our lives before I'd thought it through even a little. "You can stay at my place tonight. I've got a spare room. In the morning we'll figure out where you're actually headed." She looked at me a long moment. "You don't even know my name." "Well," I said, "that's an easy thing to fix. Dessa, she said. Dessa Calloway. Walt Kessler, I said, and put the truck in gear. And neither one of us had any idea what we'd just started. My place sits about 15 minutes off the main road, a farmhouse my grandfather built and my father added on to, sitting on land that still smells like cattle and cut hay even in the rain. Dessa didn't say much on the drive. I caught her looking at me sideways a couple times, like she was still deciding, and I let her look, because a person's got a right to size up somebody they're about to sleep under the roof of. When we pulled up, my old blue heeler, Roscoe, came off the porch barking his head off, and Dessa actually laughed, first sound out of her that wasn't guarded, and knelt down right there in the mud to let him sniff her hand. He's harmless, I said. All bark. Most dogs are, she said. It's the people you've got to watch. I didn't ask what that meant. I had a feeling I'd find out eventually, and I did, though not that night. Inside, I got her a towel and dug out an old sweatshirt of mine that hung on her like a tent, and put on a pot of coffee even though it was nearly midnight, because I didn't know what else to do with my hands. She sat at my kitchen table, wrapped in that towel, and looked around the room slow, the way you look at a place when you're trying to figure out what kind of person lives in it. There was a photograph on the wall by the stove. Mary, maybe 6 months before she passed, standing in the garden out back with dirt on her knees and a smile that never once looked posed for a camera because she never once posed for one. Dessa's eyes stopped on it. Your wife? Yeah, I said. My voice came out rougher than I meant it to. She's beautiful. Was, I said. And Dessa didn't push, just nodded. And something about the way she let it sit there without trying to fill the silence with something comforting made me trust her a little more than I had 5 minutes before. I told her the short version. Complications is the word the doctor used, though it never told me anything I could actually hold on to. 7 months along, gone within a day. She listened without saying she was sorry, which I appreciated more than I could have explained at the time, because I was tired to death of people telling me they were sorry. Can I ask you something? She said, after a while. Go on. Why'd you stop for me tonight? Man alone on a farm, no reason to pick up a stranger in a storm. Most people would have kept driving. I turned my coffee cup a quarter turn on the table, thinking about how to answer that honestly. You reminded me of somebody, I said finally, the way you turned toward my headlights. I don't know how to explain it any better than that. She didn't ask who. I think she already suspected, and I think some part of her filed that answer away to think about later, same as I did. I gave her the spare room that used to be Mary's sewing room before we cleared it out for a nursery that never got used the way we'd planned. I hadn't gone in there much in 2 years. Dessa didn't know that when she thanked me and shut the door, and I stood in the hallway a minute longer than I needed to, staring at the wood grain, feeling something in my chest I didn't have a name for yet. I didn't sleep much. Mostly I lay there listening to the house creak the way houses do, and somewhere around 2 in the morning, I heard Dessa humming, low, through the wall. Just a few notes, over and over, the kind of thing a person does without noticing they're doing it. It took me a solid minute to place why my chest went tight. Mary used to hum that same 3-note thing when she was nervous. Not a song exactly, just a habit. Something her mother used to do, she told me once, passed down without either of them ever deciding to pass it down. I lay in the dark telling myself it was coincidence, that plenty of people hum when they're anxious, that I was a grieving man hearing what he wanted to hear in the middle of the night. I mostly believed myself. Mostly. Morning came up gray and washed clean the way it does after a bad storm, and I found Dessa already up, standing at my stove, having somehow located the eggs and the good cast iron pan, without asking me where anything was. Hope you don't mind, she said. I didn't know what else to do with myself. Don't mind at all, I said, though something about watching a woman move around that kitchen, reaching for the salt on the second shelf, not the first, which is where Mary kept it, not where I'd have told anybody to look, put a strange, hollow feeling behind my ribs. We ate at the table. I asked her, easy as I could manage, how she'd ended up walking that road in a storm with nothing but a duffel bag. Her fork stopped halfway to her plate. For a second, she didn't say anything at all, just stared down at the eggs like they'd asked her the question instead of me. "I'd rather not get into it," she said. "If that's all right." "That's all right," I said, though I'll admit some part of me wanted to keep pulling at it. She nodded, quick, and got up to rinse her plate even though she'd barely touched it. And I saw her shoulders go tight the way a person's shoulders go tight when they're working hard to keep something from coming up out of them. She stood at the sink a long moment with the water running, back to me, and when she turned around her eyes were wet, and she wiped at them fast like she was hoping I hadn't noticed. "Sorry," she said. "I'm not usually like this." "You don't owe me sorry," I said. "You don't owe me anything at all." She didn't say much the rest of that morning. Went quiet in a way that felt different from careful. More like a door swinging shut somewhere behind her eyes. I let her have the quiet. I'd had 2 years of my own quiet, and I knew better than most that a person pulls a thing out into the light when they're ready, and not 1 minute before. "You do today," I said, when the silence had gone on long enough that it needed something to break it. "We'll worry about tomorrow, when it gets here." She looked at me a long moment, like she was trying to figure out the catch, and I understood that look. 2 years of grief teaches you that most kindness comes with a hook in it somewhere. I let her look as long as she needed to. There wasn't a hook. I didn't fully understand my own reasons yet, but I knew that much. She stayed a week, then 2. I told myself, and told Donna when she came around asking questions with her eyebrows raised, that it was temporary, that Dessa needed a safe place until the baby came and she got her feet under her. And none of that was a lie exactly, but it wasn't the whole truth either. The whole truth was, the house had color in it again. Dessa did things around that place without being asked. Swept the porch, got the dust off shelves I hadn't touched, found Mary's old radio in the hall closet and got it working again. And by the second week, there was music drifting through the kitchen most afternoons. Something that hadn't happened in that house in 2 years. I'd come in from the barn and hear her singing along, off-key and not caring, and I'd stand in the mudroom a second longer than I needed to, just listening, telling myself it didn't mean anything. It was the little things that got to me. The way she rested her hand flat against the small of her back when she stood up too fast. Mary used to do that exact thing. The way she pushed her hair off her face with the back of her wrist instead of her fingers, because her hands were usually wet or busy with something. The way she called Roscoe old man in this soft, teasing voice, the same 2 words Mary used to call him. One evening I caught myself standing in the kitchen doorway, watching her roll out biscuit dough with flour up to her elbows, and for one long second my brain just quietly slid the wrong name into place. I didn't say it out loud, but I thought it, and that scared me more than almost anything had since the funeral. I started wondering things I hadn't let myself wonder in 2 years. Foolish things, maybe. Things I wouldn't have said to another living soul. Was there something to the old stories, the ones my grandmother used to tell about how the people we lose find their way back to us in strange shapes when we need them the most? Was I just a lonely man building a ghost out of a stranger because it hurt less than admitting Mary was simply, permanently gone? Or was there something in between those 2 things, something I didn't have a word for, that had put Dessa on that road on that particular night, in front of that particular truck? I never said any of it to her. Not yet. But I started watching her the way you watch something you're afraid might disappear if you look away too long. Here's the part where I have to tell you something Dessa didn't know yet, and I only found out because Donna finally said something that had been sitting on her tongue for 2 weeks. "Walt," she said, standing in my kitchen one afternoon while Dessa was out on the porch shelling peas, "you understand that girl's still got a man out there looking for her. Ray, or whatever his name is. Kath the Duncan at the diner said somebody matching that description's been asking around town, asking if anybody's seen a pregnant girl with a duffel bag. I felt my stomach go cold in a way it hadn't gone cold since the hospital. How long's he been asking? A couple of days, from what Kathy said. I hadn't told Dessa that Ray might come looking. I don't think it had occurred to either of us how determined a man could be about money he considered his, more than he'd ever be about the woman or the child he'd have to pretend to care about to justify chasing it. I sat with that fear a long while after Donna left, watching Dessa through the window, shelling peas in the afternoon sun, completely unaware that somewhere in that same county, somebody was asking her name in places she'd never think to look. I decided not to scare her with it yet. That was probably a mistake. I've had time to think about it since, and I still don't fully know if keeping it from her a few more days was protecting her or just protecting myself from watching her be afraid in my house. 3 weeks in, Dessa found the nursery. I'd forgotten to lock the door. I don't even know if I'd ever actually locked it, just kept it shut and let the shut door do the work of a lock in my own head. She was looking for extra towels, she told me later, and the door gave when she pushed it, and she stood in the doorway a long time before I found her there, staring at a crib I'd built with my own 2 hands the winter before Mary passed, still wrapped in its plastic, never once used. I came around the corner and saw her standing there, and my whole chest seized up. "I'm sorry," she said, quick, stepping back like she'd been caught somewhere she wasn't allowed. "I didn't mean to." "It's all right," I said, though it took me a second to make my voice work right. We stood there together, looking at that crib. I told her, finally, the parts I hadn't said out loud to anybody except Donna. That I'd built it myself, that Mary and I had picked yellow paint for the walls because we didn't want to know if it was a boy or a girl, that we'd had the whole thing ready 2 months before it all ended, and I hadn't been able to make myself take it apart since, because taking it apart felt like agreeing it was really over. Dessa didn't say anything for a while. Then she said quiet, "I think you should use it." "Use it?" "For my baby. If you want to. I know he's not yours. But that crib's just sitting here empty, and my baby's going to need somewhere to sleep. And I can't think of a better use for something built with that much love in it than to actually hold a baby." I had to leave the room for a minute. I told her I needed to check on the cattle, which wasn't true. There was plenty of daylight left and nothing out there needed tending. But I needed somewhere to stand where she couldn't see my face doing what it was doing. That night, we moved the crib into the spare room together, and I caught her humming that same 3-note tune while we worked. And I asked her, finally, where she'd learned it. She looked at me strange. "I don't know. I've just always hummed it. My mother used to say I picked it up from somewhere, that she didn't teach it to me. It just showed up one day when I was little and never left." I didn't say anything. I couldn't have explained what was happening in my chest even if I'd tried. Ray found the house on a Thursday. I was out mending fence near the road when I heard the truck coming up my drive too fast, kicking gravel, and something in my gut told me before I even saw the man behind the wheel. He got out before it had fully stopped rolling. A lean man in his late 20s, with the kind of smile that doesn't reach anywhere near the eyes. "You Walt?" he said. "I'm looking for Dessa. She's staying here, I hear." "Who's asking?" I said, though I already knew. "Ray. I'm the father of that baby she's carrying. She's got some of my property with her, and I'd like it back, and then we can talk about the rest like adults." I didn't move from where I was standing, boots planted in the mud between him and the house. "She's not property, and neither's anything of hers. You need to get back in that truck." He laughed, short and mean. "You don't even know this girl, old man. She's been running her mouth to you about how I'm some kind of monster, I bet. She's real good at that. Makes herself the victim wherever she lands. I know what I've seen since she's been under my roof," I said. "And I know a man doesn't drive 40 minutes on a hunch unless there's money involved somewhere." That landed. His jaw tightened, and for a second I thought he might come at me, and I was ready for it, 54 or not. Instead, the front door banged open behind me, and Dessa came out onto the porch, one hand braced on her belly, face gone white. "Ray," she said, voice shaking but steady enough to carry. "You need to leave." "Dessa, baby, come on," he said, all honey now, the mean gone out of his voice quick as it had come. "Let's just talk. You know I didn't mean nothing by what happened. You know how I get when I'm stressed about money." "I know exactly how you get," she said. "That's why I'm not coming anywhere near that truck." He took a step toward the porch, and that's when I moved, putting myself square between him and those steps, close enough now that he had to look up at me a little. "You've got about 10 seconds to be back in that truck," I said, "before I call the sheriff and let him ask you about that estate money Kathy Duncan says you've been asking half the county about. I imagine a lawyer would find that real interesting." I watched something calculate behind his eyes, weighing whether I was bluffing. I wasn't, and I think he could tell. "This isn't over," he said, backing toward the truck, pointing a finger at Dessa like it meant something. "That's my kid too. You'll be hearing from somebody. You know where the courthouse is?" I said. "Use it, or don't. Either way, get off my land." He left in the same cloud of gravel he'd arrived in. Dessa was shaking by the time I got up onto the porch, and I put my arm around her without thinking twice about it, and she let me, which surprised us both, I think. "He's not going to stop," she said into my shoulder. "You don't know him. He doesn't let go of things easy." "Neither do I," I said. "And I've got more reason to stand my ground on this land than he'll ever have reason to come back for." We sat on the porch steps a long while after that, Roscoe's chin resting on Dessa's knee, the gravel dust still hanging in the air out past the fence line. And for the first time since that night on the road, she talked. She told me about her mother dying when she was 17, cancer that moved fast and left her with a house she couldn't afford, and no family willing to take her in. She told me about Ray, how he'd seemed steady at first, how steady had turned into controlling somewhere along the way without her ever being able to point to the exact day it happened. She told me about the money her mother had left her, small as it was, and how Ray had gotten his name onto the account somehow during a year she wasn't paying close enough attention, and how the night she finally asked a lawyer about getting it back was the same night he'd grabbed her by the wrist hard enough to bruise and told her she wasn't going anywhere with his kid. "I've been ashamed of it," she said, staring out at the fence line instead of at me. "Ashamed I let it get that far. Ashamed I didn't leave sooner. That's why I couldn't talk about it before. Every time I tried, I just heard how it was going to sound, like I let it happen to me." "Nothing about what you just told me sounds like something you let happen," I said. "Sounds like something that got done to you, and you got yourself out. That's the part that matters." She didn't say anything to that, just leaned her head against my shoulder, and we sat there until the light went orange behind the ridge, and I understood, finally, why she'd gone quiet as a shut door that first week. Some things take a person a while to trust anybody enough to say. That night, after she'd finally settled and gone to bed, I sat on the porch a long while with Roscoe's head on my knee, turning something over in my mind that I hadn't let myself look at straight on until then. I wasn't protecting Dessa the way you protect a stranger you feel sorry for. I hadn't been for a while, if I was honest. Somewhere in those 3 weeks, without deciding to, I'd started loving her the way a man loves a woman, not the way he loves a memory wearing new clothes. The humming, the way she stood, the salt shelf, all of that had scared me at first because I thought it meant I was losing my grip on what was real, seeing Mary where Mary wasn't. But sitting there that night, I understood it different. Dessa wasn't Mary come back in some shape I didn't have words for. Dessa was just Dessa. Her own person, her own history, her own reasons for humming a tune nobody taught her. What she'd done, without meaning to, without knowing she was doing it, was crack the door of that shut-up part of me back open. The part that had decided 2 years back it was done needing anybody. She'd walked through that door Mary's memory had been guarding, Not because she was a replacement for what I lost, but because she was the first person since who'd made me want something instead of just enduring the days. I hadn't been wondering if my wife's spirit was walking around in another woman's body. I understood that now. I'd been wondering if it was allowed. If a man who'd loved somebody the way I loved Mary was permitted to love somebody else too, without it meaning the first love hadn't counted. I sat with that a long time before I went inside. The baby came 3 weeks early, on a Tuesday, which nobody was fully ready for. Dessa woke me at 2 in the morning with a voice tight with pain, and I got her into the truck faster than I'd moved in years, driving those same back roads with my hand gripping hers the whole way, telling her to hold on. We were almost there, over and over. The way you say a thing not because it's useful information, but because saying it out loud is the only thing keeping your own hands from shaking on the wheel. They kept me in the waiting room longer than felt bearable. I sat in a hard plastic chair in a hospital I hadn't been inside since the worst day of my life, and every sound down that hallway put my heart somewhere up near my throat, because some part of me that never fully healed was certain, absolutely certain, that this was how these nights ended. A door, a doctor's face. Bad news delivered gentle, because there's no other way to deliver it. When the nurse finally came through those doors smiling, I nearly came up out of the chair before she'd said a word. "Mother and baby are both just fine," she said. "You've got a healthy baby girl." I don't remember standing. I remember getting to that room somehow, and seeing Dessa propped up in the bed, exhausted, hair stuck to her forehead, holding a small bundle against her chest, and looking up at me with an expression I'll carry the rest of my life. "Come meet her," she said. I crossed that room like the floor might give out under me. The baby had a full head of dark hair and a face still scrunched up and cross about the whole business of being born, and when Dessa put her in my arms, careful, like she trusted me with something she'd never trusted anybody with before, I felt something break open in my chest that had been sealed shut 2 years exactly. "I want to name her Mary," Dessa said, quiet. "If that's all right with you, I've been thinking on it a while." I couldn't answer right away. I just stood there, holding that baby, feeling the weight of a name and everything it carried settle into the room, and finally I said, voice not fully steady, "I think that'd be about the finest thing anybody's ever done for me." If this story's found its way into your chest, the way it found its way into mine telling it, put one word in the comments for me: family. I'd like to know how many of you it reached tonight. Ray did come back, once, about 2 months later, with a lawyer's letter about the estate money that Dessa's own lawyer made short work of inside a week, since it turned out most of what he'd been claiming as his had never legally been his to begin with. He never showed up at the farm again. I heard through Kathy Dunkig, who hears everything, that he'd moved on to Sevier County to try his luck somewhere new, and I found I didn't much care one way or the other, so long as it was somewhere far from that little girl. I married Dessa the following spring, in the yard out back, under the same oak tree where I'd once buried a box of things I couldn't look at anymore. A onesie, a hospital bracelet, a sonogram photo gone soft at the edges from being handled too much in the early days. Donna cried through the whole thing and denied it after. Little Mary, not yet a year old, slept through most of the ceremony in her carrier, at the edge of the chairs, one small fist curled against her cheek. Dessa still hums that same 3-note tune when she's nervous, standing at the stove some evenings, and I still don't have a full explanation for it, and I've come to understand I don't need one. Some things don't require an answer, they just require you to be grateful they happened. I think about that road sometimes, the one I drove alone for 2 years without much reason to. I think about how close I came to keeping my foot on the gas that night, telling myself it wasn't my business, that a man alone doesn't need to go looking for more grief than he's already carrying. I didn't lose my wife and get her back in some other shape. That's not how any of this works, and I've made my peace with that. What I got instead was a second chance nobody owed me, wearing a face I'd never seen before, walking a road I had no reason to be on on a night I nearly didn't stop. Sometimes the family life takes from you isn't the family life gives back. Sometimes it's just enough room, finally, for a new one to walk in out of the rain. Before you go, tell me which part of this stayed with you the most. Was it the night on the road? Was it standing my ground with Ray? Or was it that little girl getting her name? And while you're at it, let me know what city you're watching from, because it still amazes me how far these get. If you believe a person can lose everything and still be handed a second chance they never saw coming, give this one a like. If somebody in your life needs to hear that it's never too late to start over, send this their way. And if you want more stories like this one, stay close, subscribe, and turn that notification on so you don't miss the next one.